name is Kalai. You can call me Kal. I'm the licensed registered migration agent working for YANSYS in Australia. The reason for this is just to give you a brief overview of general skill migration to Australia with a couple of benefits, what you guys need to work for, and the process. So I go through a couple of things with you. Once I'm done, whatever questions you have, I will answer them for you. If it's anything case specific that you are interested to know something related to your profile in specific, like possible questions about your qualification, about how your profile fits in, we would then need to do a consultation, which I will leave to my colleagues to fix one up for you. Is that fair enough? So basically, Australia at the moment is, the word itself, general skilled migration. The term skilled is where they're looking for skilled workers. There are various pathways of coming into that. At the moment, what they're doing is looking at highly skilled professionals, which comes into the categories of engineers, IT, basically these two and some other occupations, even cooks and chefs and stuff, are also available. Now, it's a process involved which involves various stages. A lot of documentation is required, for which we obviously assist because we charge you for it. And when you go through a licensed registered migration agent like myself or my colleagues, we assist and we represent your application with immigration. So any questions related to your profile from immigration is directly sent to us, and eventually, we then get back to you. So having said that, I would like to discuss a couple of benefits, which I think most people would be interested to know as to why should I migrate to Australia. Right? That would be the common sort of question when you have a proper stable life here, you probably have your own house and stuff like that. So the overall cost, say for instance in terms of visa fees, that you're going to be paying roughly for a couple and say 2 kids on an average, you're possibly looking at an overall fee structure of maybe $10,000 overall, where the major part of the $10,000 is paid at the visa stage. Now the benefits, once you actually get your permanent visa, is medicals, which is the biggest and the most expensive sort of thing in Australia. So when you have a permanent visa, everything is covered in terms of medical. You can walk in and walk out of hospital. You can do your blood test. You can do what you want to do by just showing your card. And it's free. There are some cases now where, say for instance, someone is having issues like there is, say someone has an eye problem, for example, or someone has, say let's take the situation of an eye problem. Now, because it's free, they're going to assess what is the, how strong of a problem is this, and whether the person can actually survive without doing the operation. So there's a sort of a waiting period for them to get that done. But having said that, your entire family is covered for medicals, like, if you have to go, like for example, when you have to see a specialist here, you have to wait for your turn. Everything is just the same, but the service and the facility is as good as going into a big private hospital here. Like say for example, you're going to Apollo, which is a big hospital or any other hospital. All the hospitals there have pretty much a similar kind of service. That's with the medical part of things. The other thing is, now many people might think saying, okay, I'm spending $10,000, that's huge money, 6 lakhs, 5 lakhs or whatever it is. In actual fact, it's not. Because how much do you spend on a day-to-day basis? I mean, I think now in Hyderabad, I've come after a long time, I'm generally from Hyderabad itself. The cost of living is one so high here. It's almost on par with living in Australia, to be very honest with you. The good thing is, with regards to this $10,000 what you pay if you get your permanent visa, so as I said, you get medical coverage. You also get benefits for your kids, free education up to year 12. You don't pay anything. How much do you actually pay over here for schooling fees? It's very expensive. The best part is, now, I'm from Hyderabad, so I know how the structure works. Like when I was small, you don't get to decide what you want to do. Pretty much your parents look out for you in the best interest, obviously, for you. But even if you want to go for an IT course, for example, you have to write MSET, I think, get a rank to get into a good college and school. It doesn't work that way in Australia. You can go to your college, you have the money. This is after your 12th standard, after your 12th grade, to get into a college, and you can get into any field you want to get into. It's your choice. The good thing is, the reason I'm specifying on with regards to education there is because it's not like, see, I've studied in India. So with India, I know how the education structure works, wherein I personally, when I was studying, I did my BCom here. It's like before you go to the exam, I'm not a brilliant student, okay, with the education part of things. So you just have to pretty much mug it up, write your exam, pass it. There's some people who are brilliant, okay, let me not take that away. Some people are brilliant, but with Australia, the way the education structure is, they give you a book. They don't spoon feed you in anything. You have to take your own book. You read, you understand, you give presentations, and then you actually learn what you study. You don't need to mug up things. And say, for instance, I study this course today. I will use these skills in future. I'm not saying you don't do that with India. You do. But again, I feel the education system, and that's why it's a bit more expensive if you get what I mean when you want to send your kids overseas to study and stuff like that. So that's one more benefit in terms of in terms of education for your kids. Now the other thing is, say for instance there are two people working, a husband and wife, which is obviously very essential to have a good life in Australia. You probably, on an average, they possibly pay, and I'm talking about very low scale, the average salary is around, say, $40,000. And people who migrate obviously are very highly skilled people, so you don't expect them to earn $40,000. They earn pretty well. On an average, say for an IT couple, I would possibly say they're earning at least $160,000 to $190,000 together, per person, around 80 grand. The reason I'm telling you about this is because, say once you do, say you've been in Australia on a permanent visa, say for around a year or two, right? After that, if you would like to buy your own house, which eventually you want to, because why would you keep paying rent to other people, where you can have your own house with pretty much the same amount of money and adding a few more $100 towards your mortgage. It's the same thing like how it is in India, 30 years, 40 years. You have to wait till you clear it. But the good thing is, I'm not sure how the loan structure here works, whether you only pay your interest for the first 10, 15 years or whatever, and then you get to pay your principal. With there, you pay both together. And when you buy your own house, the good thing is the government pays you, like in Victoria, which is Melbourne, they give you $10,000 first home on a grant. The government gives you money. In New South Wales, it's $20,000. It varies from state to state. So that small $10,000 what you're paying for your visa fees eventually gives you very big things in the long run. So if you're interested in migration, I would strongly suggest you do, get your skills assessed. And the way Y-axis works is pretty straightforward and pretty clear. There could be a person telling us, I will pay you 50 lakhs, get me a PR. It doesn't work that way. People are very rich here. People have the money, they might want to say, I'll pay you X amount of money, I want my PR, and so on and so forth. There are different categories of visas related to someone who wants to invest in Australia, but the general common thing is the GSM, which is the General Skill Migration. And paperwork obviously is the most important thing. When you do it through other consultants, they're not registered. So if you go on the immigration website, you'll find my name, my picture, which shows I am a licensed, I'm authorized to represent your file with immigration. If you're not licensed and registered with a Migration Agents Registration Authority, which is called in short MARA, you cannot process any applications. People do process applications over here as well in y-axis, wherein they have the knowledge, they have the expertise, but it's like you're processing your application. But when it's done through us, you should know for a fact you will get thorough service. Crystal clear, thorough service. No hidden costs, no hidden sort of things just to make you feel happy. Everything is crystal clear. If A is what is needed, we will talk about A, not about B. We're not going to ask you for any additional documents. It has to be specific. The concept, what people think is the more documents you provide, the better the result is going to be. It doesn't work that way. If they want something in specific, you only give them that and nothing more than that. At any stage where people, we've come across many situations where people fake experience just to get through. What happens with those kind of people at the visa stage? They have problems if verification happens and they get banned for 10 years, 3 years, 5 years. And when they want to then reapply, it becomes a challenge, because even the next time when they have genuine jobs and they're working genuinely, they'll have a problem because they think they're fibbing it, and then it takes a longer time for processing. So in a nutshell, this is about general skill migration. As I said, it involves different stages, a lot of documentation, but something which is, when I say a lot of documentation, what I'm talking about is all work-related documents. And we first need to have a consultation. We check your resume, we check your education documents, which is your highest level of qualification. We then identify an occupation for you. We show you some roles and responsibilities of each occupation which is related to your profile. You then have a look and you say, Carl, this suits my requirement, I meet this occupation, and then the process goes on. I don't want to get too much in detail because it's going to be too much of information to take in. But as I said, if you guys have a specific need in terms of having your profile evaluated, you're more than happy to have a consultation with my colleagues, can arrange that for you. We can have it now as well. Would you have any questions to ask me? I'm sure you might have a couple of them, but any questions which comes to mind?
There were some recently announced some changes, right, in terms of native. Can you just clarify that, please?
Yeah. So what happened was, now a lot of changes have happened, not few. The major change which happened now, I've seen the news here. So they have put it out, they have blown it out of proportion, saying the Indians are the major people affected. There are no visas anymore for them, they have to go back and so on and so forth, which is all rubbish. What Australia did is, basically, they abolished a visa called a 457, which is a work permit, but they've got an alternative visa in place of that. It's the same work permit, but it's an alternative work permit. So when I say work permit, it gives people the access to work in Australia. You also, if in case, the good thing is if people are, you're basically, when you're moving to a different country, you're changing life, you're changing your life. And you're changing your life for the better, it's definitely not for the worse. The crime rate is almost, I would say, zero. There will be crime anyway. People have the perception that, I'm Indian and they're very racist. They're not. I see, I'm from Hyderabad, I know when foreigners come here, what happens to them. But, so don't think that people are racist. Everyone mind their own business. You have the best public transport in the world, and getting better. Victoria has been rated the #1 place to, not Victoria as such, but Melbourne, which is the city, has been rated for 4 times a year the best city to live in the world. And not for nothing. You have all the stores, in terms of, say, food, Indians, right? I'm an Indian myself, so I like to eat my dal, rice, and whatnot. So you have all Indian stores with all your Indian groceries, everything is available. The Chinese, again, are dominant there, like they are in any part of the world. And you still get the same stuff. So if you go to a good store and it's like $5,000, go to a Chinese shop, you possibly get it for $1,000. So it's everywhere, but it's a very good life, guys, at the end of the day. It's a good place to live in. And I strongly suggest, if you are possibly you're here because you are interested to explore the option of migrating, whether not now, whether in future, I would suggest if you qualify, don't delay it. The reason being is, as the gentleman rightly asked the question, there were some changes. We don't know what's in store tomorrow. There have been cases where people qualify today, and unfortunately, because see, with skill migration, basically, there is a list which basically says what occupations are going to be, what occupations is needed, what are in demand. Now that demand will change time to time, but engineers, and India is filled with engineers, be it IT, be it mechanical, be it electronics and communication, so many people here. You don't have that kind of people, then that's in very high demand. So age is another criteria. You delay it too long, you lose your opportunity. For any people under the age of 32, you get your complete points for your age. Between 33 to 39, it drops 5 points. 39 to 44, it drops a further 10 points. Above 44, forget it. It used to be earlier 50, but again, as I said, last July they just changed it. In my opinion, what I think is happening, and it's just an opinion, I feel whatever Donald Trump is doing in the US is having a ripple effect all around the world. Processing times have changed, how quick it happens, how slow it happens. It's again case by case. Some people get it very quick, some people get it, possibly a year or two. Then you get a good amount of ample time once you get your visa to make your entry, and subsequently, come and settle in Australia. Any questions? Sorry.
What will be the average cost of living?
It's not too expensive. It depends on your lifestyle, sir.
Mm-hmm.
You want to live a luxurious life, even $100,000 is not going to be enough for you. You want to live a decent life.
Sorry, there's service cost?
No, cost of living.
Cost of living, sorry.
It just depends completely upon how you want to live. It's like in India.
Okay.
So you say, for instance, you're staying in a little far place, you pay less rent, but you come into places like Banjara Hills, Jubilee Hills and stuff, the rent increases, right? In Australia, the way it is you stay close in the city, it's more expensive. Obviously, because the city is when I say city, it's called CBD, the Central Business District, where all the main offices and everything are there. So not many people can afford staying there. But most of the students, mind you, stay there. Because all of them have the sharing accommodation, and it's very, very affordable. Very affordable for them, and very close to their college and school. So, and as I said, people survive. You get everything in terms of food and stuff.
What we said earlier. What's the difference between the two occupational lists they brought up, MLT as well?
MLT SSL and STSL.
Yeah, so the people who are on STSL would they not get a chance to apply for permanent residence, because I believe they have only 2 years to, and it's a non-extendable kind of.
No, see, basically there are two categories of permanent visas. One is under 189, which is the independent skill migration. So occupations like a software engineer, a developer, a mechanical engineer, petroleum engineer, a production or plant man, these sort of engineering profiles are in high demand. So basically, when they get their permanent visa, they choose which part of Australia they want to settle down in. That's the MLT SSL list. The STSOL list is basically related to a state. So there's a list which has, say, 400 occupations. In that list, it's all related to the state. Now the state has their own requirements, which means they want to only sponsor specific people, not everyone. Like you have some occupation like for a horse breeder. Who wants a horse breeder? I mean, some states do want visa is you need to stay in the state for 2 years. After that, you can move to any other state where you want to. It's still a permanent visa. I think your question, what you asked, is I think what you're trying to relate to.
Beyond this 2 years.
What do you mean by extendable is the question?
What I read was, maybe I'm wrong, but what I read is that people on the MLT, SSL, whatever it is, they get 4 years to stay. So
I'll tell
after
you what
2
you-
years they become eligible to.
I got your
apply
point.
for.
I got your point. What you're asking actually is related to a work permit. I'll tell you what. It's pretty much from his question, taking it a bit further. So his question was earlier there used to be something called as a 457. So irrespective whether you're on the MLT SSL or the STSL, you used to get it for 4 years. After 4 years, now the 2-year period that you're talking about is where an employer wants to apply for permanent residency for you. He wants to sponsor you permanently. That's your question. I mean, your question basically relates to that. Now with the new rule, what they've done is, if your occupation is on the MLT SSL, you get it for 4 years. If it's on the STSOL, you get it for 2 years with a 1 year, with one more extension that you can have. But then again, on the STSOL, if your occupation falls there, you cannot apply. Your employer, even if they want to apply for permanent residency for you, they cannot. That's the new rule. But that's related to the MLT SSL. There's 190, which is the state, and that is related again to permanent residency. You have to now link the work permit to the MLT SSL. If you get it for 4 years. Again, the work permit, if you're related to the STSOL, you get it for 2 years with another extension. But if it's on the STSOL, the employer cannot sponsor you. If it's on the MLT SSL, the employer can sponsor you. Now, it's very rare that an employer will sponsor you, to be honest.
So on the STSOL, you can look for an extension.
You can get one-time an extension, but the employer cannot sponsor you permanently on a permanent visa. I'll tell you what happens in short. People who come there on a work permit pay the 457, which is no longer in existence. Now it's a 482, if I'm not mistaken. They themselves qualify personally, which means firstly to get that visa, they are qualified itself to get that visa. After that, when we assess their skills, so many people, what they do is they come to us saying, you know, I've just got my work permit. I would like to explore the options of getting a visa, becoming permanent. Now, when they're doing it on the individual merit, they're not asking an employer to sponsor. So two different things. Not everyone honestly gets an opportunity for an employer to sponsor. It's very hard. Firstly, to get this visa itself is hard. And normally the people who are on a work permit are people who work for companies like TCS, Accenture, Wipro, all these big multinational companies. They get because they have a bulk of getting these visas. Most of their employees get it, but all highly skilled. In short, Australia basically looking for skilled workers to better their economy. As simple as that. Whatever's happening in the US is benefiting Australia in one way. And Australia is huge. Like for example, from Melbourne, where I flew, to get to Singapore was 8 hours. 6 hours I was still in Australia. Another 2 hours and I went to not 6 hours, sorry. 5 hours I was still in Australia. Then I reached Singapore, another 3 hours. So Western Australia, which is Perth and Singapore, are very close. It's like going from here to Dubai. But that's how big Australia is. Any other questions, guys? Anything at all?
Do they consider health-related issues very seriously?
Absolutely. I'll tell you why. That's a good question you ask, because look at it this way. When I say, basically I pay tax. When you become permanent, you will pay tax. Why should a taxpayer's money be spent on someone who has some medical condition? So firstly, you will not get your permanent visa if you have a medical condition. Now, how serious the medical condition is, again, it's a question. If you have TB, for example, if you have cancer, those are all highly, you won't get through. But again, if you have diabetes, blood pressure, it's gone. That's not no problem. If you have a tumor, for instance, or if you're autistic, there's a lot of money that the immigration needs to spend in terms of supporting you, because lawfully, when you're a permanent resident, you're a part of Australia. And as a permanent resident, you get the benefit of a Medicaid card. Now, the other thing which I just want to quickly touch on is many people who want to migrate cannot include parents anymore. You can't include your parents under any circumstances in your application. But there's a different category of visa again for the parent, provided you finish certain time. I would strongly urge, once again, if you are interested, to definitely explore the option of migrating before it's too late. Things keep changing, which no one has control over. Today I speak to you something, tomorrow something else happens. We have to every day is a learning for us, and every day we get to learn a lot of new things and brush ourselves up, obviously, because we need to be up to date with the law, And as I said, when you go through us, you will get accurate information. There's no giving you false hopes, basically. And your case will be treated with the highest of integrity, with no information being divulged to another person, irrespective of whatever your scenario is. That's because as an agent, I'm bound by a certain law, which basically governs me to be very ethical in what I do and maintain a very professional standard in assisting you guys with your application. Any other questions?
If you do get nominated by the state,
Yes.
if your occupation falls under, and you do get, so then I think you've got two options, 190 or 489, isn't it?
489 again is a temporary visa, it's not a permanent visa. A 489 has two categories now. Again, it's a bit complicated, but I'll just try and keep it as simple as I can. With a 489, it's a temporary visa which eventually will work towards a permanent visa. So with a 489, you get no benefits in terms of medicals. However, your kids, if you have kids, they still get free schooling. People who own work permits, their kids also go to school. You pay the same fees, which is probably 5,000 rupees a month for tuition, for your books, uniform, which I think is nothing. How much do you pay a year on an average?
No, but what I'm asking is, you got the 489 visa, and then there's the SDSOL.
Correct.
So, on 489, you're getting 4 years worth stay permit or whatever. So
Yep.
on the SDSOL, you are only 2 years with an extension, is what you say.
But that's again, you see, I tell you, I think you're getting a bit confused, mate,
That's
because
what
the thing is, you're relating the 2-year and 4-year period, that's all related to a work permit only. So there are two, what we are discussing, if you want, I'll discuss separately with you, particularly only related to work permit.
What you're talking about is permanent residence.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is general skill migration. So general MLT SSL, the STSOL is a 190, again, which is general skill migration. The 489 again is general skill migration, but it's a temporary general skill migration, which will work to a permanent visa. Now, the 489 visa that you're talking about, it's a temporary visa, as we said. You need to stay in the region for 2 years and work for 1 year. Once you do that, you then automatically qualify to apply for your permanent visa. The fees you pay at the initial part is going to still be the $10,000 that I discussed. However, when you convert it, probably $500 to $800. You don't pay the same amount of fee when you convert it for the PR. So that's it. Now, in the 489, there are also, say for instance, you have a relative, your own relative, living in Australia. They can sponsor you if they're in Melbourne under relative category, but their occupation needs to be on the MLT SSL. So as I said, it's a bit complicated.
Why I'm asking you this is because if say my occupation is not getting shortlisted for a 189.
Yes.
But if I fall under the 190 or 489, wherein they expect me to stay in the regional
Correct.
area for certain amount
Certain
of
amount
time,
of
but they are nominating me for that.
Fair.
So, on what visa do I migrate from here? Is it a visa as a permanent residence, that's for 5 years? Or it's a work visa, which is for 2 years, that is the STSOL, or is it the visa for 4 years, as the 489 used to be? This is why I'm asking you these questions.
I'll tell you what, with regards to your visa, under what visa you can travel, depends on what visa I apply for you based on what you qualify for. I would not recommend you to go on a 489 unless that's a last option for you. Why would you want to come into a country when you, say for instance, you're having a 189, you're having the 190, they're both permanent visas. Why would you want to come on a temporary visa which gives you no medical benefit and then eventually apply for a permanent visa when you can first itself apply for a permanent visa? Is the thing. So when you say what visa you're going to be going under, it just depends upon what visa we apply for you depending on what you qualify for. Now most of the occupations on MLT SSL automatically come under STSOL as well. Because as I said, the STSOL is a list, but it's only related to a state. So the state, what occupations they sponsor are more or less related to the MLT SSL. It's a bit complicated.
Yeah.
It's a bit complicated. I will probably, if you want to get into a bit more depth, we'll have to do a consultation and I can probably spread it out very easily for you. But I honestly think your questions are very right, but you're mixing a work permit with a general skill migration. I think once you segregate both of them separately, you'll get a very clear picture of what you need to understand. Any other questions, guys? All right.
So is there any careers at the pharma industry for pharmacy graduates?
I'm sorry, sir?
So is there any pharmaceutical jobs?
Pharmaceutical jobs?
Yes, sir.
Yes, definitely. There are, see, your occupation as a pharmacist might be available on the list, which would be most likely on the STSOL, which is a state list, wherein a state needs to be sponsoring your occupation, but yes, there is occupations available in that category, most definitely.
How much time it takes for applying the interest, expression of interest to the particular state?
It honestly depends on the state requirements, sir. So sometimes you possibly, if you apply for an EOI through a state, and if you're looking for a state to sponsor you, sometimes you get it within a month, sometimes you get it within a week, sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes 2 years. It all depends on demand. Even though the state is saying, I will sponsor you, if there is no demand as such, so what they do is they do a labor testing. Even though the occupation is there, they might not have so many jobs available in that particular occupation, as a result of which you might not be invited. So it's honestly, it's a hard one to answer as to how long it's going to take, because it varies from case to case.
I think we can work on a different platform once we come.
Absolutely. That's one good thing with Australia. Once you get your permanent visa, you can do what you want to do. Open your own business if you want to. No problem. You don't have to work in your specified occupation for which you've got your visa. That's another advantage. And the reasoning I think behind that is eventually the government knows you will get back into your line of work, because that's your core experience that you've had throughout. And that's
I'd like to meet someone after this session.
We have
a thing.
That's, we do have. So is the doubts, everything clear? Any other doubts or questions you have?
So the first step is this expression of interest. That's what you need to know. Sorry, okay.
First, it's a different category. There are a lot of steps involved, which possibly we can have a session.
So what I would recommend is, thank you so much, Khalid. So what I would recommend is, we have a consultants there. Okay, you can have a free counseling with them. They'll counsel you on the country thing and all, like specific discussions in terms of your profile. What you all need to know is, first, what we discussed just now is the programs what we can apply for, the visa categories. But first question, and the important thing is, are you all eligible, or are we eligible to apply, is what is the main thing. So I would recommend you have a personalized consultation call. It would help you to understand or see yourself, your profile, in a better way. Then you can take the decision. Okay, so we have the consultants available over there. You can just talk to them. You can go to the reception the other side. Okay, and you just ask for the consultant, and you can talk to our consultants. And then, if you require, they will pass it out for the consultation. All right? Okay.
Thank you guys for your time. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Migration agent, working for Y-Access, and I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm registered with the Migration Agents Registration Authority since 2011. I've been practicing immigration law since then in different areas of immigration law for Australia. I've been dealing with skill visas, student visas, employment visas, and different family visa categories. While working with Y-Access, I've had the honor to process large number of applications. I would say 70% would be skill visa application, 20% would be students, and then the rest would be others that I've dealt with throughout my career. In relation to Australia's migration procedures, we are a very multicultural country with a stable economy, which makes us competitive very much, and it is our desired destination for many migrants who are coming in. We welcome skilled migrants very much so, and the country is really free from any sort of political upheaval or any discriminations as such, and it's based on full democracy and, as I said, a stable economy. Yes, it's a problem there that we are too far away though from the whole world, but of course that may be understandable. In terms of skilled migration program, Australia has a system where it attracts migrants from different parts of the world, and we'll be selecting candidates free from discrimination and on the basis of merits of a case. And we're looking at qualifications, and we'll be looking at employment, English language proficiency, where the Australian government is selecting their migrants intake. As you may be aware that in the old days there was a White Australia policy, but that's been removed and eradicated a long time ago now. So as I said, it's a non-discriminatory system across anyone who's coming in, when and if eligible for the right visa to be coming in. If I were to be talking about skilled visas today, there are really three streams of skilled visas we look at. There is a list of occupations every year being reviewed by the Australian government in consultation with the Department of Industries, Employment and Education. There are 5 states in the country and 2 territories. So the oldest state is New South Wales, and the biggest city is in Sydney, followed by Melbourne as first and second biggest cities in the country. Sydney and Melbourne are not considered regional. Brisbane and Gold Coast are not considered regional. The other parts of Australia are considered regional areas. So there are some benefits with regional migration to the country as well. These benefits are mainly the additional points that an individual can claim on the basis of migrating to those regional areas, living and working in those areas. As you may be aware, the skilled migration is a point-tested system. So individuals' points are varying and ranked accordingly. They are ranked on the basis of different factors, which are age, English language proficiency, qualification, employment, and other factors. Now, these other factors may be a spouse's skills, say you have a partner who is also equally qualified, interpreting skills, say you are expertise in another language. There are also other beneficial factors of people who actually come to Australia for studies. So say there are more points awarded to those individuals who are coming in on student visa, completing the 2 year of study, so more points awarded with that, with Australian education in a respective and registered course. So these are how generally points are classified as. In terms of occupations, there are over 250 occupations available for migration purposes. However, not every of those 250 and above are easily migratable. Hence, the occupation list is divided into 2. One is looking at the medium to long run, which are really focused on some health professionals, IT engineers, other engineers, and trade professionals, say like mechanics and chefs. The other occupation is more looking at short-term list, we call them, so looking at short-term needs of the country. So these may be, again, those professionals that I just explained, in addition to some other general classified occupations, which may be in marketing, maybe in sales, in finance, management, consultancy, procurement, these sort of stuff we're looking at, as some particular trades that are not available on the main list. So in order to apply for the main list, the medium to long run, an individual should be coming in from those sets of list of occupations. If not, then a sponsorship by a state or territory will be required if you were to be coming in from a short list occupation, not available in the main occupation list. States and territories have their own requirements, their own criteria, and their own guidelines in selecting candidates. what they mainly look at is the shortage and demand of those skills in the particular state and individuals' employability. So an individual who can demonstrate more availability of employment if and when the individual were to migrate, there are higher chances of a state nomination approval. That's what they really mean. Yeah? And of course, there are also some other benefits too, like if you have a family member in that particular state, okay, or a job offer in that particular state. Anybody who wants to come to the country on the basis of skilled migration will need to also satisfy the Australian government that they have the required skills. In order to satisfy, case by case is different, but according to the individual circumstances, there are different departmental authorities assigned by the Minister of Home Affairs. These authorities are skilled individuals who will be looking at individuals' particular qualification and employment. Either it's IT, engineers, or general occupations. So they're classified accordingly, and they make a thorough and transparent assessment of candidates. The moment we undertake the assessment, we present the case in full, high quality, and to the best of our ability, convincing the relevant assessing authority that the skills is needed. The authority's assessment outcome will be successful. Upon receiving the success, we can then express our interest to apply for the skilled visa. And that's where the individual pointing system comes into place. The assessment outcome, unless specified, are normally valid for 3 years upon grant. So in the period of 3 years, we can be expressing our interest anytime there, when we have the required points, when we have our English language test available, and so on. Once we are selected by the Australian government to the pooling system or the capping system, in other words, which are reviewed every financial year, we are given an invitation to apply for visa. We have 60 days to apply for visa. We'll be looking at 3 months to 5 months to get the visa. Once we get the visa, we are having an estimate of 9 months to make the entry to the country, even for a day. But the visas that we get are either permanent visa or a provisional visa. So in that case, we have 3 streams. The first is the independent category, is a permanent visa or a subclass 189, which is people are selected through the capping system, through their expressions of interest. The first is when we approach states to get nomination. That's called a subclass 190 visa, which is again a permanent visa. That's not affected by the pooling system. So long as the states are sponsoring us, we're fine to go. The third is, as I initially explained earlier, is a provisional skilled visa, which is the regional sponsorship. So we get additional 10 points for that category, but when the visa is granted, we get it provisionally. We don't get it permanently. We get it for 4 years. The reason being is we should be proving to the state that we're happy to live in your state. The moment we convince them that we find jobs, and we are there for minimum of 2 years, see, I'm settled in there for 2 years now, the state is going to give us our permanent residency. So these are the main 3 streams I wanted to discuss today. Of course, we got the skilled visas, we got temporary visas as well for graduates, which I explained briefly about them as well. But when it comes to offshore skilled migration, that the migrants are coming in normally, these are the 3 streams we look at, which again varies from case to cases, individual to individual. So this is a generic advice and information I'm giving out today. In terms of assessing your individual circumstances, we need to have a face-to-face consultation with either myself as one of the registered migration agents of Y-Access or the other 2 who are here today as well for the purpose of this seminar. and helping out with the information. In terms of benefits that we get while we come in as migrants, as permanent resident, everyone is entitled to free healthcare. Everyone's also entitled to free education for their kids at the public schooling level. So these benefits are available to every migrant coming in. When we look at more benefits, including child support or other social security benefits, those are applicable after 2 years, not within the first 2 years. Unless we come in under some exceptional circumstances or we were to prove to the government that we are facing financial hardship. That's normally when we got families and kids along with us. So these are some general benefits out there. If you were to study at tertiary education, the payment will be considered, you will be considered as a local student. So there won't be any need to pay for an international student at the university level. Same would apply with PhD scholarships, for instance. If I talk about temporary visas, which are also considered to be part of the skill visas, they are normally awarded to students who come in for a study. I briefed you out earlier. So the students get the student visas and coming in. Upon 2 years of study, there's almost a guaranteed visa, we say postgraduate study visa, which is given to the individual and which is valid for 2 years. So that's a time where the individual can be exploring the job market there, be looking at the employers, be exposing himself into the market there, the local market, I would say, improving their English language proficiency if needed, and ultimately apply for the respective permanent residency visa or any other visa categories that may be available to that person. So that's also part of the skill visa program, but it's a temporary visa skill program. So I give you a brief idea and general information about skill visas. If you have general information or questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
Let us go for the student visa.
It's student visas. It's student visas.
Undergraduation.
Undergraduation, yes. To obtain a student visa, an individual will first need to secure a confirmation of enrollment from the university. That obviously can be done through YSS as well, with assistance of education agents. And once that's secured, the student would apply for a student visa, which is again done by one of us or other process consultants at YSS. In order to confirm or more or less guarantee our confirmation of enrollment, the university has some requirements. They'll be looking at English language capability. They'll be looking for you, the student, to have access to funds to completing their studies. Now, universities vary. In most of the cases, the universities would not be looking at evidences of funds, but at undertaking from a student to have access to availability of funds before issuing the COE or confirmation of enrollment, as we say. Once the universities have satisfied about the genuineness of intent of a student, after reviewing the CV, after reviewing the previous educational documents, and satisfaction with the funds availability, they will issue a COE. The moment we have a COE, we need to make our application for visa, which is a easier and less stringent process. And that's how the process of a student visa is for.
What is SOE?
COE, confirmation of enrollment. So that's normally a letter or a code which is awarded by the university.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
Yeah, just to add to that, we
Yeah.
have brief student visa for the postgraduates.
Postgraduates, so to gain a student visa, you mean? To
Yeah.
gain the initial
Higher
student visa?
education of postgraduate level in Australia.
It's the same process that I just explained. It's a similar process. So the undergraduate and postgraduate is a similar process. unless the person were to complete research studies or PhD and were to require a scholarship. Then that's a different process, because that needs to be arranged by university. Yes.
So does Y-axis extend support for all the facilitation?
Like scholarships, admission. In terms of a scholarship, to be honest, I have to speak with our education agent.
Okay.
Because I'm not the education agent. I deal with the visa part. I don't deal with the education part. Okay? Once the education team confirms and provides the confirmation of enrollment, the case comes to me then. So these are the better people to advise on that particular criteria. Any other general questions that you guys have today before I leave you for the day? About the skilled migration program as a whole, the streams that I just explained, the benefits of migration, the policy as a whole.
Can you brief about the student status to the PR status?
Yes, definitely. So
After undergraduate?
Yes.
After undergraduate?
not a problem at all. As I explained earlier, that's a very good question actually. That's the reason that the students coming in, as majority of the students would like to convert the visas to permanent residency. So that's where the postgraduate study visa is for. So the moment the student completes the studies, the student needs to apply for postgraduate work study, which is a temporary visa given for 2 years.
Is it
Compulsory?
No, it's not compulsory to get that visa, but that visa is an added benefit for the student who is qualified.
Is it available after undergraduation also?
Absolutely. It's available after graduation.
Undergraduate?
Yes, bachelor degree, it's available, master degree, master by research, and PhD. But the validities vary. So for a bachelor degree and a master degree to graduate, the visa that he or she would get is 2-year visa. The master by research and PhD graduate will alternatively get a 3- and 4-year visa. That's a temporary visa for graduate, designed for graduate, and it's not an stringent process to get. So wealthy student would get that visa. In other words, the student would be buying time to be looking for options to convert visas to permanent residency. That's where then we gotta be doing further evaluations of whether the students will be eligible to apply for PR on the basis of his own skills, whether we would need to seek any state sponsorship on the basis of graduation, or whether the students to be looking for employment and be sponsored by the employer, because that's another category as well which is available. So in other words, the purpose of this visa is to explore our options, to have sufficient amount of time to be exploring, okay, where we are now, what have we done previously, what did we study in the recent 2 years, what's the current situation in terms of migration for the time being, so what's ahead of us. That's really the purpose of that particular visa. There's no mandatory requirement to apply for that visa. The student may be able to be eligible for skilled migration on the first day and get the PR accordingly, or be sponsored on the first day. But for those who may be needing more time to be in the country, that option is there. The linkage again, as you explained, the linkage again of a student studying and the linking it to the PR visa is again, states play an important role here. Because some states would have some requirements encouraging students to study at their own states. Once the study completes graduation in the state is easier offering a sponsorship to the student. The moment the student gets the sponsorship and subject to meeting the points criteria, the student can easily apply for permanent residency. Personally, I would recommend students studying in more regional states than New South Wales and Victoria, as there are added benefits in studying in those states. The states are more flexible in offering the sponsorship. The students can gain 5 additional points by studying and living in those regional areas. That's in addition to the 5 points the students would get on the basis of just studying in Australia. Any other questions? Jerry?
Is aging limit of age for the immigration?
45.
45 is highest.
Correct. It used to be 50, but it's now turned to 45. So we have until 45 years of age where we can apply for PR. The earliest we can apply is being 18. The oldest we can apply is 45. Of course, our points would vary according to our age. So there's a highest limit and there's a lowest part as well.
Going back to student visa, while continuing education at the PG level and graduation level, do they get opportunity to work there?
Yes. At the research and PhD level, the student would have full work rights.
Not the PG level and graduate level.
At the master's and undergraduate level, the student would have part-time work.
Yeah, part-time work.
That's allowed. Yes.
It's allowed?
Absolutely. 40 hours per fortnight.
Okay.
40 hours for
Fortnight.
work wherever he can work.
Wherever he would like to work.
Okay.
Yes.
Wherever these services are needed.
Correct. The work does not have to be related to the field of study. Any kind of work, and that's also, I'm not even counting the weekends and the public holidays or summer holidays. So there's no restrictions to work on those periods as well. So the 20-hour weekly work, it only comes in a duration of study while the course is going on. So if there are summer breaks, for instance, the student can work unlimitedly.
If the English language, regarding the English language test and the points, if it is less than 65 and he is getting 0 points from the English language, less than 50.
Right.
So is there any possibility to get the PR, but his total points is exceeding 60 points?
Yes.
Based on his qualification, PhD and experience.
All of this sort of stuff. So you mean with no English at all? Or
No,
with
English test appeared, but
competent
the
level?
score is less than 50 in PT.
Oh, right. Okay. With less than 50, for instance, in PT competent level, which is 15.
50 and more than 50.
Correct. With the PT or 6 IELTS each band.
So more than
6.
50 is competent level.
Competent level.
But the points will be 0.
Points will be 0 for the English factor, yes. But if gets the invitation with 65, that's absolutely fine.
What are the minimum points that required for getting invitation?
60 by law.
60?
Correct. 60 is in regulation. 60 is the minimum points required to submit the expression of interest. However, as I explained to you, the occupation ceilings play a factor here, and invitations are issued twice in a month. So the higher invitation issued by the government, the higher chances people getting invitations with 60 or 65. The lesser invitation issues, it's becoming more competitive. Hence 60 by itself would not guarantee any invitation. Requiring higher points and capabilities to be more competitive.
Filing the expression of interest won't require any charge.
No charge. No charge. It's free of charge to file an expression of interest because technically there's no application made and a submission of expression of interest.
So is the expression of interest is the first stage of process to begin?
That is not correct. The first stage is to undertake the skill assessment.
Okay.
As I explained previously,
Yeah.
to convince the government that we are skilled professionals.
Yes, okay.
And we are proven by your departments. That's the first thing we got to do. That outcome is valid for 3 years unless otherwise explained in some authorities. So in the 3-year period, once we are 60 or 65, we can submit our expression of interest. But the first thing we need to do is to do a skill assessment as a prerequisite of every GSM application.
You said 5 points you will get from regional area. not
10
from-
points.
Okay.
10
For the
points.
skill assessment, if the invitation will get from the state territory, from New South Wales or Victoria, then we'll get 5 points.
Correct. Absolutely correct. So if we look at regional areas in Victoria, or regional areas of New South Wales, or all the states South Australia, for instance, we get 10 points, not 5 points. But if we only get a state from any state, we get the additional 5 points.
May you know what is the skill test called? What is skill test called?
A skill test,
What basically is like a GRE?
GSM,
What is it called? Exam?
General Skill Migration.
Okay.
Yes. So general skill migration is normally we call it independent category. A skill nominated system is normally we call it when there is a sponsorship by the state.
For 190 visa, as you told, if you have 60 points and if it is less than 65, there are lesser chances to get the visa, right? So
For 190,
190.
we do not have, because as 190 is not affected by the pooling system or the capping system. So yes, an individual with 60 can get sponsorship from the state, hence applying for the visa.
So you say there is no.
So we are actually passed to ACS.
Right,
and
right.
We are into EOI.
Right.
We have only 60 points, considering all the.
Yes. So
So
Yeah,
we have less chance or.
yes, look, what I'm trying to say is with 190, there's no caps at all. So the state can nominate, and even with 60, you can apply for visa. However, the state have its own capping system with issuing invitations to individuals. That the state itself is looking at more points from you to issue you the invitation. Of course, I have to be consulting with you separately because I need to be reviewing your case and see what you have really done. But this is just a general explanation. Any other general questions?
I have, based on my PhD,
Right.
I have reached 70 points, but the English test won't add.
So you don't have competent English at all?
No, I don't, I have 0.
You're a PhD graduate with no competent English?
Not English, hostel English.
So, look, with no competent English at all, have you done your skill assessment?
Yes.
You've done that. Okay.
Positive.
Positive. Wonderful. So with no competent English at all, we cannot submit the expression of interest, unfortunately. So that's not something we need to do. Yes.
In India, when we said, because Australia students admission is concerned, one example called IELTS,
Correct.
and one more called JRE,
Correct.
one more called PTE.
Correct.
Is this criteria for the admission to Australia?
For universities,
You're right?
absolutely. Some universities
Yeah.
may not accept the GRE though.
Okay.
Most would do.
I see.
IELTS and PTE are accepted by all universities. GRE, it's 50-50.
I see.
Yeah.
Is there any advantage for a student who has done undergraduation in Australia and compared to the student who has completed post-graduation in Australia when they apply for PR?
Advantage of a student graduated in Australia?
No.
Yes, as I explained, there are different added advantages.
The 24 points must be
The
there.
points test
There
will
are
vary.
two cases.
Yes.
There are two cases. One
Yes.
is one student, gets into Australia undergraduation study
Right.
and post-graduation study there.
Yes.
Undergraduation in Australia, post-graduation in Australia, applies
Right.
for PR. Another guy is there
Yes.
who studies undergraduation in India and studies post-graduation in Australia, applies for PR. So in which of these two cases
What
are
difference
more
is there?
chances of getting PR?
All depending on the points that the individual can get. So not much of a difference per se. Because if we look at the 5 points for overseas Australian study, the person individual would get it anyway. To one course or different course. If we look at points for education, bachelor's and master's would equally award the same points again. So that's again the same thing. If we look at the 2-year graduate visa, after study, individual would get it anyway again. either completing the bachelor's or after completing the master's by itself. So not much of a difference in there, because in that case we just need to be looking at the profile as a whole, the work experience, post-qualification, English language, and all the factors.
So can you draw a parallel? In US you have a F1 visa and OPT and H1.
Right.
Then green card. There are some stages there.
Yes.
So can we compare? And in our understanding level here in Australia, student visa and
Yes,
next
student visa,
next.
graduate visa,
Okay.
PR,
Yeah, directly PR. PR after PR is
citizenship.
citizenship.
If the individual would like to apply for citizenship,
What
there's
is-
no obligation to become an Australian
Yeah.
citizen.
What is the process?
What is
for
the period of PR validity?
4 years. The validity of PR is 5 years,
Okay.
but 4 years residence in order to apply for citizenship.
4 years residence.
So look, PR doesn't have validity as such. PR is PR, indefinite right of entry. The travel facility got 5 years validity though, just the travel facility. Okay, so upon 4 years of stay in the country, with recent 12 months as permanent resident, 4 years of stay on any visa, with 1 year as permanent resident, according to today's law, they're trying to scrap that, people can apply for citizenship.
Then can you pardon repeat, please?
Yeah. So 4 years of stay in the country,
Any kind of visa.
any visa,
Any
Students, temporary.
any temporary visa.
Continuous or some discontinuous
There are gaps for overseas absence, of
Okay.
course, yeah.
Okay.
But generally 4 years temporary
4 years.
residence,
Okay.
with the latest 12 months as permanent resident.
Oh.
So I am in the country for 7 years now, but I do not have a permanent residency. Can I apply for citizenship?
No.
No. I'm 4 years here as fully permanent resident. I'm a skilled migrant. After 4 years, can I apply? Yes. I'm here for the last 3 years on a student visa, and for last 12 months as a permanent resident. Can I apply for citizenship? Yes. So that's how the criteria is established.
How much time does it take to get this citizenship?
Very good question. The first thing you need to apply is to make the citizenship application. That is normally, we're looking at average 60 days to be processed. Of course, these days, to be honest with you, it's taking longer because of more checks and more processes. The moment the application is processed, the person is invited to appear for the test. There's a test there, citizenship test, which is an easy test, basically, just on the basis of understanding Australian values and standards and stuff. The moment you pass the test, your citizenship application will be approved. However, this does not mean that you are an Australian citizen. The only time we become an Australian citizen is when we are attending the ceremony. The moment we attend the ceremony and swear to Australian values and standards, on the same day, we are granted with our citizenship certificate. That's where we are officially an Australian citizen, where we can apply for an Australian passport, for instance. So the whole process from start to finish, we'll be looking at less than 12 months.
So, couple of clarifications.
Of
Very
course,
good
of course.
What is this percentage of success rate from PR citizenship? This is one. And when are the benefits of Australian citizenship?
Benefits of Australian citizenship.
And percent of success rate from
Success rates is very high because the government is only looking really at residency. The government looking at the period of residency, overseas absence, and criminal records. If those are satisfied, there's no other reasons for an application to be refused. In terms of benefits of citizenship compared to PR, is entitling individuals to obtain an Australian passport, we can travel freely to different countries where they may not be well on an Indian passport, so visa free, I would say, and eligibility to vote in federal and state elections, and eligibility to obtain government employment in both the state and federal government, like in the public sector. So these are really the main advantage of really gaining Australian citizenship as opposed to just being a permanent resident.
How many countries we have the access to visa free?
We are number 7 now.
70?
7th strongest passport in the world, with access to 174 countries visa free.
Visa free
Without visas.
Without applying for any visa.
Without applying for any visas. For travel. Yes, yeah, for traveling. Yeah. Normally for traveling up to 90 days.
Yeah.
Travel, something like that, yes.
So that's almost on par with the US citizen.
Very, from what I know this year, US passports has only got one additional country than Australia that they can travel freely. So they're number 6 ranking, we are number 7.
Oh, I see.
The Singapore and South Korea are number 1s. Germany and Sweden are number 2. The United Kingdom is number 3, along with some other Scandinavians. We are now on number 7, with only marginally a little difference. We're traveling freely through those countries. Correct.
And for PR, do we have any visa-free facility?
To New Zealand.
New Zealand.
New Zealand. Because we got free trade agreements with New Zealand.
Okay. Only one New Zealand.
Correct.
For traveling to US?
As a PR, you will need to apply for US visa.
Okay.
As a citizen, you do not need to apply for visa.
For US visa?
Correct. It's only an electronic travel approval that you need to apply for, which is nearly granted in a day or something.
Oh.
Yes. So it comes under visa waiver program.
Visa waiver
program.
Waiver.
Correct. Yes. But as permanent resident, you need to apply for visa. You need to attend the consulate interview as part of the US requirement. Regular. So these are definitely the advantages of Australian citizenship as compared to permanent residency for sure.
And what are the conditions that the US government will impose if a PR or a citizen of Australia wants to apply for some job in US?
A citizen of Australia would, from what I know, would have easier process because then they were looking at you as an Australian. So the condition would be the work visa that Australians can get and stay there temporarily.
But
deposit
be the commander that regular H-1B category?
To be honest, I cannot 100% advise on the US criteria on visas because I don't really know about the US. I know about the Australian.
But how the general Australians, not the immigrants as such,
yes.
General Australians do approach for jobs in US?
That's not something 100% I would know because it's not coming under my expertise. It's something that they need to be looking at through the US government consulates or embassies. Any other questions today, generally, that you like to
Sure. One thing. Recently, we got news that Australia scraps work visa program used largely by Indians. What does it mean and how is it implemented?
Well, Australia's abolished the temporary work visa, and when I say abolished, it's all been replaced by another temporary shortage visa category. Temporary shortage visa category. In terms of Indians, I don't really know where you got that information because that's absolutely not true. Yes, so it's not scrapped because a large number of Indians as such. It's basically scrapped and replaced with another category at the moment, where we call it temporary short skill visa or subclass 482. This is replaced by the previously temporary work visa or subclass 457.
So
this is implemented as from 18th of March this year.
But do they have any major implications?
It's the major implication really is that it scraps some jobs for medium long term to short term list. So an employer can get the visa for up to 2 years with the possibility of 1 extension. But that's only the occupations in the short-term list. So that's really the major implication. Whereas previously, any occupation would have got the 4-year visa, and while working 2 years for the employer, they could have converted it to permanent residency right away. So that's a major implication.
So it's basically 457 visa program.
That's what is abolished today. So we do not have any new 457 visa applications anymore, but we do have 482 visa applications, which can be made. It's temporary, again, as was 457, but it's got a little bit of a slightly different criteria.
But this is different from PR.
This is different from PR, but may be convertible to PR. So if we look at one occupation list, the medium and long term. Yes, thank you. So the list is divided into 2, as is with the skill migration program. One is MLTSSL, medium to long term. One is STSOL, short term list. So if the occupation comes under that, the person would get a visa with only 2 years validity. Say an occupation of a cook, for example, or a pastry cook. Finds a pastry shop. The pastry store sponsors the person. It's approved. The person gets temporary work visa with 2 years validity. Upon completion of 2 years employment, the person can only apply for one-off extension of another 2 years. And that's what would happen. It will not lead to permanent residency. Whereas previously, any occupation on 457 would have led to permanent residency upon 2 years of employment with the same employer. If an occupation is on the MLTSL list, the requirement is much more flexible, and it is almost the same criteria as it was previously. So the sponsors an IT software engineer in a big IT company. Software engineer is included in that list. The person gets the 4-year visa. Working 3 years for the employer, as opposed to 2 years previously, that's the only change here. The person would then apply and convert the temporary 482 visa to permanent visa, which is as simple as 1S6.
Any age restriction for the short term?
That's a short term. That's a long term.
So any age restriction?
Age restriction. With the short term, there's no age restriction.
Any age?
Any age. Even with this one, there's no age restriction to apply for the first temporary visa. However, converting to PR, age restriction will come then, which is the 45 years of age. So that's again a general and brief explanation about the recent changes in the temporary work visa program, or subclass 457, which is no longer available. But in terms of Indians and that, where you explained about the Indians, I'm not sure that is exactly correct. So that's really applying to everybody with every nationality.
So here in this STSOL temporary visa, there is no provision for migration, conversion to PR. Here, there is no.
Not to the employer. No. Not to the employer.
Not through
Not through the employer.
but through
Other sources, of course, depending on the eligibility of the respective visa, absolutely. So like depending on if the person is qualifying for points and skill visa, that can be done. That's a different process.
A director.
Absolutely.
So we have two streams of through MLTSSL conversion to PR or directly PR?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's definitely correct.
In some of the health occupations, is some exam is required to pass to get the job over there. Some of the paramedicals, like for example, industrial pharmacists required to pass the exam to get the job over there.
That's not correct for industrial pharmacists. It's correct for retail pharmacists. Though. Retail pharmacists.
Okay.
Yes.
Industrial
Because
pharmacists, no exam.
No
to get the
exams.
job.
No exams. Industrial pharmacist is considered a different occupation and is assessed by different assessing authority.
1 night.
Correct.
What is the difference of industrial pharmacist and chemist?
Industrial pharmacist is coming in under pharmaceutical itself, whereas chemist is obviously working into the chemistry labs and, you know, like a life scientist sort of thing.
So both are different occupations?
Different occupations, yes. Yes, different occupations. So we have industrial pharmacist, we also have a chemist. But chemist is no longer on the list. Chemist is removed from list as a whole. So a chemist cannot any further apply for permanent residency on the basis of the
No,
service.
3 years back it was there.
3 years back it was there, that's correct.
So every chemist has to apply at the industrial pharmacist occupation?
Correct. As long as there are relevancy, yes, with the occupation, absolutely, correct.
But you will get the relevant job, chemist job here.
Look, we talk about the skill program and migrating to Australia. Once the person is in there, then the persons be able to find relevant job or even can work in different industries.
Is there more chances of invitation if the qualification is higher, like PhD and English test is competent?
It can be, as the PhD increases your points for qualification. But at the same time, if it's not compensated by English language, there's no chance. They're all parallel with one another. Somehow they gotta compensate one another. That's how it is tested.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So, can we compare the chances of getting PR by doing undergraduation course and immediately just undergraduation only? After undergraduation applies for PR. So what are the chances of getting that?
Occupation to occupation varies.
Oh,
Suppose IT.
IT. You need to apply for temporary visa first.
oh.
That's what I told you, because you need 1 year work experience after the graduation.
Okay, what about mechanical?
Unless you do a master in IT and you previously held work experience in another country, then that experience would count because that's after your bachelor degree.
So for PR, we require 1 year experience.
Correct. If applying on the basis of graduation in Australia. Yeah.
If a student is done mechanical engineer as his background and has over 4 years of experience, how can he go there?
We need to do an evaluation of your case through evaluating your profile as a whole. So mechanical engineers are very good professions. They are on the list. 4 years experience is significantly good experience for migration. Having said that, we need to assess your points factors as a whole, not just on the basis of your 4 years experience. So we need to do a resume check for you. You need to give us some information, so we prepare a proper evaluation and give you an advice.
I know.
Yeah.
When we will apply the jobs over there.
Yes.
So at the time of interview and
Yeah.
assessment, they look the skill assessment and
No,
outcome.
they wouldn't.
For example, something you have missed in skill assessment, for example.
No, they wouldn't.
Award
No.
of some higher degrees.
No,
and
no,
the
no.
skill
They
assessment.
wouldn't. They
They
wouldn't.
will consider if you have the higher degree and
That's it.
something which is not covered in the skill assessment.
Absolutely. The employer would not know about, would not care about your skill assessment. The employer needs to be satisfied about your resume.
Your competency.
Competency. So if
They
there's
will
no,
consider the degree which is not covered in skill assessment.
as long as they're happy with your competency as the gentleman mentioned, yes, then you get a job, yes. And you have to work hard, of course. That's what they do. Your skills are assessed for migration purposes, not employment purposes.
Entry to Australia.
Entry to Australia. Absolutely.
Suppose a person gets PR
Right.
and he enters into Australia, and the employer who has promised him the job and all that, he's not able to get, or some change in the terms of employment and all that there. So he will be unemployed for some time there. So what happens?
So we talk about the employer sponsorship pathway. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So employers are sponsoring the individual on those visas. The individual
PR, directly
PR. Well, you mean PR through the employer or PR on the basis of a skill migration? That
Yes,
is like
yes.
a skill migration. Nothing's going to happen as long as the person can fund his living.
Oh, so as long as the person can fund his living?
Yes, absolutely. And as long as he's living happily himself, everyone's living happily with him.
So
That's not a problem at all.
in this system, in this temporary visa, the problem comes.
Correct, because that visa eligibility arrives from the employer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The PR eligibility is arriving from the skills of an individual.
It means,
And the 2 years passed, the person is still jobless,
Yeah.
then he can approach the social security system and get them, give me some money. I don't have jobs, I need to make ends meet. And he's eligible for that.
What is the social security that government extends to him?
Depending on the financial situation, normally these kind of individuals would get New Start Allowance.
New?
Start Allowance. It's a fortnightly payment.
Fortnightly payment?
Yes, the government would pay to an individual. Look, to be honest with you, it's not significant,
So maybe
but it's quite generous
generous and
until the person finds secures employment. So it's called New Start Allowance.
As you said, the economy is very strong, so there is no chances of unemployment.
We would never be in a position to say there's never chances. Yes, but there are higher chances of securing employment for a skilled professional like yourself. Because correct, the economy is strong, it's stable, there are shortages of skilled occupations. So Australia is actually seeking for a right individual like yourself with English language competency and the skills that is needed to be contributed to the economy. So I wouldn't say why you would have difficulty in securing employment. Yes, you may not find a job in the first day, but if you're looking at 6 months' time, you will be securing employment.
Yeah. And the question maybe not related to visa exactly. The economy as such, which are the fields that the economy is most dependent on in Australia? Is it IT or is it industry?
Estates vary.
Okay.
Very much because estates have their own economies and revenue. So if you look at Victoria, where I am, for instance, it's very much related to finance and IT.
Okay.
What about
In New South Wales, it's very much dependent on manufacturing.
Okay.
And again, IT. So basically, New South Wales is number one in terms of economy, the biggest economy in Australia. Sydney, as you may already know. It follows by Melbourne. Then the other cities, including Brisbane and Adelaide.
Okay. And mining and all that is there?
They're normally in northern Queensland and Western Australia.
Mining, they are very much.
Because we got the mines in those areas.
Mine.
Having said that, at the moment the mining industry is not that great.
Which is the field that is great? Okay, simply you can tell.
Health,
IT,
finance.
Health, IT, finance.
And trade professionals.
Trade.
Yes. There's always a shortage of trades.
Okay, health occupation is good in this one.
Everywhere. Every estate, I would say, health professional is number one.
I mean, industry.
Yes, of course. Any health industry, yes, including nursing.
Actual sciences, how is it?
In terms of eligibility for PR or securing employment there? Securing employment. I have to check that, to be honest, because we need to be looking at markets, we need to be looking at some websites, because these are really coming into industry-specific sort of stuff. But yeah, but it comes under accounting, I would say, more finance again. So yes, they're also available, because again, it's coming under finance. So as I said, it's quite good industry. Anything comes under finance is quite good. IT engineering is also very good field there.
One last clarification.
Of course, of course.
So a person can go to Australia.
Yes.
One is to the temporary visa, subject availability, eligibility. That's
Yes.
one. And subject eligibility, somebody can go on PR also. All right.
Very correct.
Okay.
Very correct. Thank you for your time today, all. I'll leave you with Kartik today to wrap up this meeting. It was lovely meeting you all.
Thank you.
And if you were to require more specific migration advice, I'm here to help. My other colleagues are here to help as well. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you. So you can actually, if you want to discuss consultation with people, there are already consultants available. You can wait there in the front office. I can assign consultants for you. And if you want to go for a consultation with the RMA agents, specifically to your particular profile, you can have that, which the idea will be given by our consultants. So they are actually busy, but you can wait there in front office. I'll assign the consultants for you.
I would
Okay.
like to know about the admission for the post-graduation.
Yeah, sure, 100%. That side, that side.
With regard to admission to undergraduation.
Right. Yeah, we can, but I think for undergraduation that particular